Hi, my name is Danielle Whitland, and we're sitting here with Miss Wanda Knox, Brother James Knox's mother, and he describes her as a genius. So we are going to get some wisdom from her today and learn about her life. And can you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born in Oklahoma City on August the 9th, 1925.
And can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? What was it like growing up?
It was interesting because shortly after I was born, the Depression began, and we moved from house to house as we gradually lost one job after another from my father trying to find work. We'd sell a house and move to a smaller one, and I always tell everybody that I went through 7 schools in 3 states in the first grade.
Wow.
So that was always a real bugger to me. I hated moving after that. But we moved probably every 3 years most of my life.
Wow. What were some of the struggles growing up in the Depression?
One bad thing was having to wear other people's clothes because my things would wear out, my shoes and so forth, and my cousin would send me things. Her dad didn't lose his job, so they were able to continue to upgrade things to fit, and mine didn't, so it was kind of hard that way. And we moved finally back out to my grandfather's, my dad's father, and that was on a farm, which was quite a different experience from living in a city. So that's what I remember most.
How many siblings did you have?
I just had one brother, 3 years younger than I was.
Okay, praise the Lord.
Yeah.
And we understand that you were saved at a young age. Can you tell us about that?
I was saved when I was 5, and I still very clearly remember it was on an Easter, probably maybe Palm Sunday or Easter, sometime during the spring, and I started thinking about how they were reading the things that happened to Jesus when he was being persecuted before he was crucified, and I started crying because I thought I was so bad I caused them to do that to him. And that's when I felt I had to do something to let him know I appreciated what he had gone through. So that's, as I say, I was 5 at the time.
So even as 5 years old, you were a genius.
Well, I don't consider that genius.
That's wisdom for a 5-year-old.
I guess.
To recognize.
And I wish I'd stayed as close to it as I did then, but as always, we slip away and sin when we shouldn't. That always sends a shudder through me when I think back what I have done and what I shouldn't have done. But I'm thankful to be here now and able to attend services as regularly as I can.
And we're glad that you're here too.
Thank you.
We've learned so much from you. All right. You were married to a very successful businessman for 5 decades. What were the keys to making that work?
Wow. Well, first, let me back up and say that he grew up in a more depressed area than I did. Actually, I think they claimed they had maybe $5 of cash went through their house in a year's time. His dad was killed in an accident at work when he was 18 months old, and his mother moved back with her family out into the country, and it was real hard scrabble. And he went from that to taking himself through the military. He was a submariner during World War II in the Pacific, and he decided to go into banking after he got out of the service, and he started as a messenger boy from that and worked his way up to being one of the youngest bank presidents in Florida.
Wow.
And so he was very successful. He worked through national bank things, programs, and they even sent him overseas on trade missions for the government, so
wow.
It was interesting.
And how did the two of you meet?
At the bank, we worked together, so started there. And I had seen him earlier and wondered who he was when he had come back to town after service. I didn't know him during the war at all. And I asked several people who he was. He worked at a different place at that time. And then I went in one day to make my deposit, and he was the teller that waited on me. And we got acquainted then, and then I went to work there. And my boss assigned me to help Maitland, who was my husband, type up his schoolwork as he went through banking school, so we got acquainted that way. And then we worked together from then on.
And you had children together?
We had 4 children. James is the oldest, and the ringleader. I have two girls followed him, and then my youngest was the boy, and he was born on the day that John Glenn went into orbit for the space program, and everybody at the hospital was upset that I didn't name him John Glenn. But we figured we had James, who was a New Testament name, and so we named him David for the Old Testament.
And they're all relatively successful and model citizens. How did you make that happen?
A lot of spankings. Well, they were just all pretty smart kids, and they each chose their own pathway. Diana, for a while, she's the oldest girl, a year younger than James, and she went into banking, so followed her dad's footsteps, yeah. But that's about it, I guess.
If you could give us any marriage advice and parenting advice, what would it be?
Oh my, be patient, pray a lot, and just, I don't know, just try to remember that they're all individuals and have their own personalities, and don't expect the same thing from each one, because it doesn't happen. And all my children were born within a 5-year period, so they're very close. Diana and James are a year apart, and then we had a gap of a year, and then Linda and David were a year apart. So the three of them, the first three, were born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then David was born here in Florida, and we've lived here since '61.
Do you prefer Louisiana over Florida, or?
Oh, I've gotten used to it now. I'm not really a great outdoors person, so Florida wasn't that appealing, but got used to it and like it, and it's been home so long now that I wouldn't change it.
Nice. All right, let's go to the next question. In your lifetime, we got home radio, the television, rocket ships, and the internet. You lived through the Great Depression, rationing, and World War II, the Vietnam War era, and so much more. What is different about society compared to when you were growing up?
Oh my, that's interesting. It's totally changed because it was all very free and outgoing, and you could run around the neighborhood and let the kids out to play and so forth, and now you're scared to death to let them cross the street. Don't know who's around. But it was just an easier time. Even in the Depression, you still had a wonderful time. I was able to live close to my cousins at my grandfather's, so I had that experience. And I don't know of anything else that would be different. It's just so different, and there's so many things that have changed that I wonder where did all this happen in my lifetime, but it really has. It's been a remarkable change, and the situation is entirely different now than it used to be. I don't know what else to ask you about or answer about it.
It's so sad that you used to be able to let your kids go out and play, and
oh, it was entirely different, and we never thought anything of letting James and the boys run around on their bicycles all over town, and now you have to track them on your phone to be sure they're safe.
And what do you think the cause of that is?
Oh, people turning away from church, and when they took God out of the schools, they just followed Darwinism and felt themselves acted like animals instead of people. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Sure. I wish we could somehow go back to those times, even though...
I don't think they ever would, but there are a lot of things you don't want to go back to, so we have conveniences that make life a lot better too now. I remember the first time my mother got a washing machine that had a wringer made on it, that you didn't have to hang the clothes, wring them out by hand and hang them up. So a lot of that stuff is much nicer now, dishwashers and stuff.
Seeing all those inventions, what would you say is your favorite?
Probably the washer and dryer, or maybe air conditioning here in Florida, because it's pretty tough some summers.
I'm thankful for both of those things. Yeah. What are your favorite verses, passages, or Bible stories?
That's a hard question. Well, I like the Advent story, and the resurrection story probably is the outstanding one. As far as verses, I keep shifting. My husband has a Bible verse on his tombstone, and I think I've changed what I want on mine for about 6 or 7 times, so I don't, my favorite one changes from time to time. So I couldn't pick any particular one.
Right. What would you say are the most important things you have learned about life as a Christian?
Let go and let God is always my motto. And if you don't, you know God or you know Jesus, you're fine. And with no Jesus, you're in real trouble. And I think that's basically it. Yes.
Right. You've got to have Christ in your life, or else you're going to have...
You have no life at all, really. It's just very miserable without. So, yeah, I don't know what I would do without it. And I know when Maitland died, I thought, wow, the first time I'd ever lived by myself, and yet here all of a sudden everybody's coming in from church to help me, and I just have leaned on my church family ever since. Been 5 years now, or 15 years actually, and I don't know what I'd do without any of them.
Wow, praise the Lord. Will you show us one of your notebooks? Do you
I
have
didn't
one
bring
with
them.
you?
No, I didn't, but they're all in shorthand, so you couldn't
Miss
read it
Wanda
anyway.
writes in shorthand, and I don't know shorthand, so when I've looked at her notebooks, I have no idea what it says.
Nobody does. I keep a notebook at church. I probably never refer to most of them. Once in a while, there's a scripture mentioned that I like to look up. But basically, I use it, keep my head down so I'm not distracted and I can pay attention. So that's the whole basis of the notebook.
What kind of things can you tell us about shorthand? What is shorthand?
Shorthand is a bunch of symbols that represent words, and used to be very fast at it. I practiced when I was taking it in school by listening to the radio and take down anything anybody was saying to try to keep up with it, and you learn to do it real quickly.
Did they teach you that in school?
Oh yeah, I took 3 years of it. In fact, used it as a secretary when I finished. Worked for a lawyer for quite a while. But I don't know now that my shorthand would match the shorthand book. It's probably my own invention.
For people who do not know him, tell us about your husband and his accomplishments.
Well, as I mentioned before, he became a banker, and he was a good-looking man and very, as James says, an Old Testament type person. He was very strict and had a bad temper, but a wonderful, wonderful person, and really did a lot of things that people weren't even aware of that he was helping others around. At one time, he was president of 2 banks here in Florida at the same time. Drove back and forth to Pompano, which is South Florida. Just a very busy person. He liked to play golf and liked to get out a little while. Taught the boys how. But,
Can you tell us how he got saved?
he was saved before I ever knew him. He was saved probably as a teenager. But he said he couldn't remember having been baptized. So when James first thought he was saved and was still a young boy, Maitland and James were baptized at the same service. And so that was kind of interesting. And James grew up later and felt he hadn't been as dedicated or aware of what he was doing, so he reclaimed his salvation, I guess is the way you'd put it. But
what did you both think of when Brother James became a preacher?
Well, it was a big change from what he had been, but he was rather worldly young man with music and so forth. But when he was saved, he was definitely saved because his whole life changed, and he went out of his way to try to get others to understand what it was worth, what it meant to him and to them to be saved.
That must have been an interesting time.
It was quite interesting because it was when he finished high school, and it was a complete turnaround. So he went from sunglasses with rhinestones around them to being a preacher. I have to say, when he first started out preaching, though, he was entirely different than he is now, and we didn't even follow him because He was zealous, and he thought he knew who was saved and who wasn't. I like the way he's grown up in the ministry, and it's interesting now to sit under him and try to not remember that it's my son, but it's the pastor. And also, churches we went to, and here again it goes way back, I went to all kinds of churches as I was growing up, and at that age and time, there was very little difference except maybe in the ritual of it. You could go to a Baptist church or a Methodist, and they were all preaching the gospel. But then they had traditional things that changed it around. And now I like the way we do here, that it's more Bible study than it is preaching. And that's really good, beneficial. And even at 94, I'm still going to the classes and still learning, so it's always...
Not so much opinion, but straight from the Bible.
Straight Bible, and you always something to learn.
You're quite the traveler. Can you tell us about the places that you've been, your most favorite place that you've traveled?
I've been to all 50 states and all the Canadian provinces.
Wow.
Mexico and several countries in South America. Love a lot of Caribbean islands and mostly Europe and Northern Europe. I think my favorite foreign country would naturally be Israel. I found that most fascinating, and it was fun. Our guide used the Bible as a reference, and he would read from it each morning of the places we were going to go, and that made it really bring it to life. I like that, and I also enjoy going to national parks like James does, and I just like to travel.
Do you have a favorite national park?
Yeah, Yellowstone. I think I've been to Yellowstone probably 12 or 14 times. Would go back tomorrow if I could still travel.
What are your favorite things about it? Why do you like it so much?
It's beautiful, beautiful territory, and lots of beautiful animals. It's just a great place, and it's so diverse. It's mountains and waterfalls and canyons and everything. And it's pretty, and we've enjoyed it. Taken the children and my grandchildren there. Traveled several summers with my daughter and her children.
Brother James speaks often about his rebellious teen years. Did you ever foresee him becoming what he is today?
No. Farthest possible thing. Thought he was going to be a rock star, and he thought so too. But no, he's matured and quite different from what he was as a teenager. So it can happen with anybody. Those of you who have troubles, just be patient and keep praying.
Can you tell us any stories that you remember of Brother James during those times?
Yeah, I can tell you one I was reading this morning.
Okay.
He and his friend decided when the crossbars were down at the railroad crossing, they would see how far they could ride. So they held on to the crossbars until they went up. Bubba fell off. James got all the way to the top.
How did you deal with things like that?
I let his dad deal with those.
That's probably for the best.
Well, I found out in disciplining him, if I did, then when Maitland would come home, he'd get it again. And I thought that wasn't fair, so I let it go and let him take care of it.
What traits did you see in him as a youth that led to his being where he is today?
His ability to concentrate when he was studying, I think that helped him. And he had a terrific memory. He could read a page in a book and recite it back to you first time out.
Even when he was a young boy?
Even as a young boy. When he was a real young boy, he started reading before he was in school. And he went to the city library every week or so. And at one time, he had read every book in the children's section. So we would have to find books in the next area, grown-up section that he was able to read. So, yeah, that all helped him. He was quite a student. And I used to sit and go over things with him. I remember when he was in college, we were learning different rocks. We would sit for hours going through the list of those. And he got his degree, and I felt like I should have gotten one, too.
And you do have a degree?
No.
No, you don't?
I just went to high school. I never went to college at all.
Wow, I'm surprised.
No.
I imagine.
Wish I had. Well, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a teacher. But the war started, World War II, and I went to work at one of the military camps. And by the time I was working there for civil service, I made more money than a teacher would, so it seems silly to go back to try that. But no, I never went to college. My regret, I think now they see advertisements that you can get your degree online, and I think, I might try that. And then I thought, why? I'm 94, what do I want with a degree now?
You're never too old to learn.
I guess not.
But you are in Bible school.
That's it. I'm still learning, but I like that better than college.
What was it like during World War II?
It was interesting. I worked at a military camp, as I said, and in fact, I worked at two of them. They moved one and consolidated with the other. And at one time, I'll tell you a funny thing. We had POWs from Germany, and they did little jobs around the camp. And they had one, at that time you didn't have automatic setups. The young man would set up the pins at the bowling alley, and I was getting ready to bowl, and one of the pins fell over, and he jumped down to stand it up. And I let the ball go, and it hit him and knocked him out. And I was very gullible. Everybody told me I'd killed him. And I was afraid they were going to send the Red Cross after me. So that was kind of a strange incident. But it was interesting. I belonged to the USO, and we would go each night to a different camp to entertain, not entertain as such, but to visit with the soldiers, write letters for them or send packages and stuff. Oh, wow. So it was a fun time for me. Sad at the same time, because you would know 1 week and next week they'd gone overseas.
Wow.
You meet new people.
That's sad.
Yeah.
You've been through a lot.
Well, it's all interesting, and I don't think about it until I start like this and start reminiscing. Excuse me, I can't talk.
Finally, you're 94 and in great health, have a keen mind and memory, and everyone who knows you loves and admires you. What is your secret?
Whoa. Up to the Lord, I don't know. I'll just give him credit and turn to him when I need it. And that's the extent of it, I think. A lot of it's my friends and help from the church family that keeps me going. So,
do you have any advice for us young ladies, young wives and mothers?
Be patient and just turn to the Lord if you need help. That's all I can say. I firmly believe in prayer and Bible reading too. I just think it helps and keeps everything going.
Well, thank you for this interview. I know
you.
it'll be a blessing to others.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Okay.